So now we've looked at adding some static FM to a sound, which is certainly cool, but that's only part of the way FM works. Now we're going to have a look at dynamic timbre control using envelopes and LFOs. Earlier on, I mentioned that operator was another word for oscillator, which is true, but it's not the whole story. In the context of an FM synth, an operator is actually a bundled up configuration of an oscillator and its accompanying envelopes and amplifiers. The envelope inside an operator, in general, controls its volume, and each operator we used in the previous example had its own envelope doing its thing on the oscillator's volume, but everything was static because all the envelopes were set to our traditional no attack, full sustain, no release on-off envelope. When we start experimenting with different envelope controls over volume, FM comes alive. One of the main claims that people make about FM is that you don't need a filter section. To be honest, I've never really understood quite why this claim needs to be made. I've always sort of thought it's kind of like saying the cool thing about sandwiches is that you don't need bacon. Sandwiches are kind of better with bacon. But then I love my analog filters. This whole you don't need a filter claim is actually totally true. Basically, you can get the same kind of tonal shifts and timbre control that you would get from a filter by careful use of envelopes. In this case, in operator, I'm going to simulate an acidic pluck that would normally come from a low-pass filter. We have two operators in action, that's it, with operator A as the carrier and operator B as the modulator. If you remember, a higher pitch on the modulator creates brightness, and so I'll dial up a higher harmonic setting and then introduce some FM from the modulator to the carrier by use of its volume control. You can hear the sound brighten as higher harmonic content is introduced. If we control the volume of this modulator using an envelope with no sustain and a short decay, we can hear an interaction where the sound starts off with lots of high-frequency harmonics, but quickly loses them, in a similar fashion to a low-pass filter shutting and cutting out the highs. Likewise, if we add attack and decay to the envelope, we can get a wompy bass sound. Obviously, LFOs controlling amplitude will take on the same kind of property as an LFO going to filter cutoff. Using multiple operators, either as carriers or modulators, things become complex but cool. The next sound is much more intricate in terms of its routing than the one before, but it's pretty easy to grasp still. Instead of having one modulator dedicated solely to one carrier, we have one modulator going to two carriers. The carriers are at different harmonics as well, which means that the harmonic relationship between them is different, i.e., the modulator is at the 13th harmonic from operator A, but only the 12th from operator B. The operators are controlled by different envelopes, some with long attacks, some with short, and operator C has some LFO controlling its amplitude as well. Operator D, which was inactive in the previous example, serves as a modulator for operator C, which is both D's carrier and the modulator for operators A and B. This means that when we activate D and introduce its FM into C's signal, C's timbre and therefore its effect on operators A and B changes. I'll pitch down operator D, so now it's actually below the fundamental, and you can hear it adding those lo-fi, grungy, gritty LFO qualities to the overall signal. In addition, in this configuration, we have a new option made available, which is feedback. Feedback in an FM synth involves taking the output of the synth and patching it back into the input of the first operator in the chain, so it can provide an FM signal to that operator. Needless to say, this produces some complex results. Obviously, while these are the main timbre controls available to you, filters will still be of use as sound sculpting tools. And in particular, they can be great for taming out-of-control harmonics or shaving out lows and highs, as you would in a normal subtractive environment. So to recap, timbre control in FM synthesizers can take the form of normal filter-based subtractive signal sculpting, or it can rely on FM strengths, which is to say it can be done purely using amplitude modulation of various carriers and modulators. If the modulator is higher than the carrier, it will add brightness, and the higher up the harmonic scale you go, the brighter or more metallic the sound will become. Envelope control over these modulators can be used to emulate filter controls, but it can also allow for some bizarre and complex otherworldly sounds when multiple envelope shapes are used on multiple operators. Operators that are modulators can also be carriers for other operators, adding even more complexity to the signal. Finally, feedback can add another element of grit to your sounds, giving you a pretty well unlimited range of expression.